Okay. Wait a second. So, how are you, Bu Ika?
Oh, it's been, I guess, a nice morning, and I hope that everybody here also enjoying their morning. Yeah, so I guess I hope that everybody is in a high spirit, although the class is in the morning, like very early at 7 a.m. But I hope that everybody um, will enjoy the class today about talking head, yeah, and a bit about the language and the brain, yeah. So yeah, so I am excited, and thank you, Ibu Nurencia, for providing me with this opportunity. Um, I hope that this will be a nice start. This will be a great start for future collaboration between our universities and our linguistic program.
Yes, hopefully. Thank you, Bu Ika. So, good morning, everyone. I think, well, most of everyone is here already. We have two classes, Bu Ika. So, class G and class F, they both take trends and issues in linguistics, but I combined those classes together this morning. Last week we have already talked about syntax and discussed the chapter from Steven Pinker, Talking Heads. Yeah, and they have already answered some questions. Maybe they have problems along the way when trying to answer those questions, and they can ask us those questions to Buika or to me in the meeting. But the whole lecture today will be from Bu Ika Nurhayani. Bu Ika Nurhayani is a lecturer from Universitas Brawijaya, and she is the coordinator of the master's program in linguistics, and she graduated from Cornell University, and she got her Ph.D. from there. Okay, so she's a master, like she's an expert in linguistics. She will be talking as the main speaker at an international conference on Japanese linguistics this year. So yes, this is a very great opportunity that you are able to listen to Bu Ika's lecture. All right, time is yours, Bu Ika.
Uh, Thank you very much, Ibu Nurencia. Good morning, everyone. Just like what Ibu Nurencia just explained, I am teaching across the street at Brawijaya, and my specialty is linguistics, which I will now share a little bit with you in the hope that you will also be interested in pursuing a study uh, possibly in linguistics in the future. Yeah. So please allow me to share the materials for today. So mostly today I will use the materials from Stephen Pinker's Language Instincts, Chapter 7, The Talking Heads. Okay. Beside the talking head, I will also speak about the uniqueness of human language, and then a bit about the language and the brain, and then we will directly discuss parsing and sentences of human language, as described by Stephen Pinker in the chapter 7 of his book of Language Instinct. Okay, so without further ado, let us start with the first discussion today about the uniqueness of human language. Okay, so first, we have this big question: is language unique to humans. Um, why I discuss this with you? Because as a linguist, I receive questions or requests from non-linguists about animal language. One time I was attending an international workshop in Germany, and then another participant asked if I could help them studying the language of insects. Yeah, so this person's specialty was on insect, and she asked me if I could help her to study the language of insects. Yeah, of um, at that time she was specializing on bugs. Yeah, um, so as a linguist, we are supposed to understand what makes human language different from animal language. Yeah, so let me ask one of you. Yeah, what is the difference between human language and the sounds that a monkey or a bird make? Yeah, can we classify uh, the sounds of monkey that they use to communicate with one another, and the sounds of birds as equal as humans language? So maybe I will ask this question to one of you. What about if I ask Hana, yeah, Hana Virus, yeah, do you think that human language is equal to the types of sounds that monkey and birds make when they communicate with each other?
In my opinion, it's equal because human language is the way we understand to each other, but and sound of monkey and sounds of bird is just the same with us with human language, but it's only them that understand the language of the sound of them.
Mhm. Okay, thank you, Hannah. So Hannah thought that the sounds of animals, such as monkey and birds, are equal to humans' language. It's just that only them who understand the language. Okay, what about if I ask another person about this? Yeah. Um, Let me ask another one. Yeah. What about Aki? Yeah. Moh Aki. So, are you there, Aki?
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm. So, do you agree with what your friend just said?
I agree with Hannah with what Hannah said, ma'am. But I think human language is more complex than animal, ma'am.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How
Yes, yes,
is that so? Why do you think that human language is more complex than animals' language? That's very interesting.
yes. I
Mm,
think in animal they just make a sound of one nada. I think like that. And human language is more complex and more diverse than animal. I think like that.
okay, okay, okay. So, um, you thought that you think that human language is more complex because animals' language is limited, yeah, to certain sounds. Yeah, is that correct, Eki?
Yes, ma'am. I think. Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Eki. Yeah, one more person before I move to the next slide. Yeah, what about um? Zulfiana. So Zulfiana, do you agree with what your friends said earlier? Zulfiana, are you there? So if Zulfiana is not ready, I have to ask Nabila. Yeah. So Nabila, do you agree with what Aki and Hana just explained? Okay. What about Ayu? Yeah. Ayu Saraswati. Yeah. Do you agree with Aki and Hana?
Yeah, I just want to ask that if the difference between animal language and human language is human language has a specific message to convey. Meanwhile, animal language is just giving signal to another creature that what something that they are perceived.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. So from our discussions, we got 2 points. The first one from Aki in that human language is more complex than animals language because animals language is much more limited. And the second one from Ayu in that human language actually conveys messages, while animal language respond to certain stimulus in the nature. Yeah. So let us see. Yeah. Okay. So now we will look first at animal sounds. Yeah. So many studies have shown that animals, such as birds, use different alarm calls uh, to alert their kind, when predators are around. So um, these are the list of what bird sound can mean. So, for example, birds can make alarm calls with sharp, piercing calls that they use to warn other birds of danger. They can also make baking calls. Yeah, so this usually is made by young birds, and they may include small peeps, whines, rasps, wheezes, and chirps. They also can make flight calls. So, for example, when birds fly, they can make certain sounds um, that will inform them about the condition of their flight, yeah, like winds, directions. And then birds can make songs. Yeah, these are longer, more elaborate, yeah, with more musical strings of syllables. And they use this song to attract mates, advertise their territory, or discourage intruders. Yeah. So again, animal can make sounds. They can communicate with one another, but then they mostly use it in response to what nature demands of them. For example, they make sounds to alert of the existence of a predator nearby. They make sounds when they're hungry, for example, they want to advertise their uh, area, that belongs to them. Yeah. So basically, animals make sounds when nature calls them. Yeah. Okay. So now we know that animal mostly make sounds to respond to natural stimulus in the nature, yeah, and also that their sounds are limited to certain natural calls, yeah. Let us see now about human language, yeah. So human language is unique in that it's more than a process through which meaning is attached to words or sentences, because language, yeah, as human language, might be described as the ability to take a finite set of elements, such as words, and using a set of rules, grammar, and syntax to create infinite combinations, each of which is comprehensible. So this is the one that Aki pointed out. So animals' language is limited, but human language is infinite. So human language is infinite because human can make or can create infinite combinations. Okay. Therefore, yeah, what makes human language unique is not that it allows us to communicate with each other, but that it allows us to do so with infinite variety. Yeah. So that's the uniqueness of human language, in that we can make infinite combinations. We can make infinite variety. We can convey infinite messages using infinite combinations of words, of sentences. Yeah, so so this what separate human language and animal language. Okay. So far, do you have any questions? Yeah. Okay. If you have any questions, then I will move to the next topics. Yeah. Okay. So by now we understand that human language is unique and that it's different from animals' language. So how can this possible? How can we um, construct infinite combinations of words, of sounds, of sentences? How can this be? Okay, because our brains are designed for language. Yeah, so our brains are designed to use and also to operate language. Okay, so but how did they get that way? How can our brains well suited for language? Yeah. So in next discussion, I will discuss uh, on how language, um, on how our brain is designed for us to use language. Yeah. So you will see the picture here on the right side. These are the areas of our brain that are responsible for the use of language. So we have here the broadcast area, the motor cortex, yeah, and also the Wernicke's area. I will explain later what these parts of the brain contribute to the use of language in human. Yeah. So again, these are parts of the brain that controls language or controls our speech. Okay, before we go further to brain and language, I will ask you now to look at chapter 7 of Steven Pinker, The Language Instinct. So basically, Pinker mirrors or strengthens the theory of Chomsky that you just learned in previous weeks, yeah, about the innate grammatical knowledge. So according to Chomsky, each human being is born with innate grammatical knowledge. Therefore, each human being is prepared or is equipped, yeah, with uh, tools, to understand and to use language. Okay, this is in line with language instinct proposed by Steven Pinker. Okay, let us see one of the example on how a human is born with the capacity to use and to understand language. So human infants like newborns, yeah. So if you observe newborns or human infants, they come with enormous acquisitiveness for discovering patterns. So they are very much in tune or sensitive to patterns of sounds and languages that they are exposed to, yeah, in the first months of their life. Yeah. So, for example, newborns detect typical speech sounds. Okay. So, for example, yeah, a 6-month-old Japanese infant can still detect English R and L sounds. And after another 6 months of exposure to the Japanese phoneme, the child standardizes on the Japanese phoneme and hears L and R as the same. Yeah. So for you who are familiar with Japanese, you will see that Japanese analogy doesn't differentiate between L and R. So for Japanese speakers, the phonemes L and R, they are crammed into one phoneme. Yeah. So Japanese phonology doesn't differentiate between L and R. But then, miraculously, a Japanese infant up to 6 months old can still detect the sounds of R and L, yeah, L and R. This means that the infant is equipped with the tools to use and to understand every phoneme in human language. But then, after another 6 months of their life, they are already exposed to the Japanese phonology, and then um, uh, they forget, yeah, or abandon their innate knowledge, yeah, on the phonemes of R and L. Yeah. So this is proposed as one of the examples on how each human is born with innate grammatical knowledge, yeah, with innate language instinct. Okay, so this is one of the example, yeah, of them. Okay, so let me ask one of you, yeah, do you agree with the language instinct, with the innate grammatical knowledge? Yeah, do you think that each of us, yeah, is born with the tools to understand and to use language? Yeah, let me ask one of you, yeah, for this, yeah. What about Aulani? Yeah, so Aulani, do you agree that each human being is born with innate grammatical knowledge or innate language instinct? Yes, Aulani, yeah. Are you ready to answer the question? Okay, what if I ask another person? Yeah. Rati, yeah. So Rati, what do you think about this theory of the innate grammatical knowledge and the language instinct? Yes, Rati, yeah. Are you there? Hello? Rati, yeah. Okay, so Ratih is not present, yeah. What about let us ask Rifki, yeah, Rifki. So Rifki, do you agree with this theory?
Yes, I do agree that a baby can learn patterns very easily.
So you agree with this theory, yeah, Rifki. Thank you, Rifki. Yeah. What about Farah? Yeah, Farah. What do you think of this innate grammatical knowledge? Yeah?
Personally, at first, I was kind of disagreement because I think that we learn languages from our parents and because of our social influence. But after you give the example of the Japanese infant, I guess I can agree with the theory.
Thank you, Farah. Yeah, thank you for your insight. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So each of us, yeah, is born with tools. Yeah. In this case, our brain. Yeah. So our brain is designed to use and to understand language, as you can see in the picture that I put here. This is in line with the theory of innate grammatical knowledge, and it is realized in the form of parts of our brain that help us to control and to understand speech. Yeah, so this is what it means. Yeah, by innate grammatical knowledge. Yeah. Okay, so now I will continue. So thank you very much for the insights. Yeah, and let us continue now with the next. Yeah, so we will speak now about parsing. You can find this in the chapter 7 of Pinker's book that you all have. So parsing is sentences comprehension. Yeah. So our brain has a mental program that analyzes sentence structure, referred to as a parser. Yeah. So our brain has a mental program that analyzes sentence structure, referred to as a parser. So before we speak or when we hear an utterance, then our brain activates, our mental program activates. And this program analyzes sentences, sentence structure, yeah, and we call it a parser. Yeah. So we have a parser in our brain that analyzes sentence structure. And this helps us to produce utterances or to understand utterances. Okay, so for example, yeah, the brain parses speech, finding subjects, verbs, and other parts of speech innately and unconsciously. Yeah. So this parser, for example, can help us to find subject, verbs, and other parts of speech. Yeah, innately, yeah, and unconsciously. So this is what our parser does in our brain, help us to understand language by, for example, finding subject verbs, yeah, or parts of speech. Yeah. So what else that this parser can do? Yeah, let us check. Yeah. Okay, so this is one of the example, yeah, of constraints to parsing. So in Pinker's book, you will see how how the chapter. Yeah, there's a message. Yeah. Okay, okay, yeah. Thank you, Ratih and Alia, for the notice. Yeah. Okay. So let us see now. Parser again. Yeah. So in Pinker's book, chapter 7, he tried to compare how artificial intelligence parse sentences compared to human. So this is what he found. Yeah. Okay. So for human, the parser is constrained by memory, specifically short-term memory, and the need for decision making. Yeah. Okay. So memory is easy for AI, but hard for humans. So for computer, it's easier for them to memorize sentences, but then it is hard for humans to memorize complex sentences. Okay. Okay. So for example, it is harder for human being to parse this sentence. Yeah. Remarkable is the rapidity of the motion of the wing of the hummingbird. Yeah. It's quite difficult for a human being to remember the sentence after a few minutes, yeah. Because apparently human beings use mostly short-term memory, while AI, yeah, such as computers, they have them stacked in their programs. Yeah. Okay. Okay. However, human being is far more intelligent. Yeah. Human being is far more equipped, yeah, for decision making. So although human being lacks of the use of long-term memory, although human beings' memory is limited, but then human being is very good in decision making. Yeah. So human being can decide quickly, yeah, on which sentences combine with which ones quite easily, because they are they are better in decision making. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So basically, AI such as computers, they are better in memorizing sentences, but then AI is slower in combining sentences, yeah, in combining words into meaningful messages, yeah, while human being is very good in combining sentences, in reacting on what utterance, yeah, should be said to respond uh, to a question, for example. Yeah, so this is what Pinkers found, yeah, in this book. Okay, and next, let us see the example of parsing. So this is a very simple example on how parsing is done in our brain. So we have here a sentence. I took this from Pinker's book. The cat in the hat came back. Okay, so how do we parse this sentence? So first, we group words into phrases. So in our brain, we group words in the sentence into phrases. So we found the cat in the hat and then came back. Yeah, the cat in the hat is a noun phrase, and then came back is a verb phrase. Okay, so once we group these words into phrases, now we move to determine the subject and the object of the sentence. So we found the object, which is the cat in the hat. Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, we look up at the verbs entries to see what the subject is doing. Yeah, so we look up at the verbs and we found came back. Yeah, came back. Then we found the word came back. Yeah, came back. So this is how parsing is done in our brain. Yeah. Okay, so first we group words into phrases, and then we look for the subject and the object, and then we look at the verb entries to see what the subject is doing. Yeah. Okay. So this is parsing of a simple sentence. Okay. This picture that I took from Pinker's book will give you an idea how a simple sentence is parsed using the phrase structure rules. So the phrase structure rules that are familiar in syntax is designed according to how human brain parses sentences. So for example, a sentence can consist of a noun phrase and a verb phrase. Yeah, so this is a simple sentence. So a simple sentence consists of a noun phrase and a verb phrase. And then a noun phrase can consist of an optional determiner, a noun, and an optional prepositional phrase, as we have here. Yeah. Okay. And then a verb phrase can consist of a verb, a noun phrase, and optional prepositional phrase. Yeah. Okay. And then a prepositional phrase can consist of a preposition and a noun phrase. Okay. And then the nouns in the mental dictionary include boy, girl, dog, cat, ice cream, candy, and hot dogs. Okay. And then the words in the mental dictionary include eats, likes, and bites. And then we have here P or preposition. We have with, in, and near. Yeah, and this include with, in, and near. So again, the phrase structure rules, as in English here, actually describe or in line with how our brain parses a sentence. And we do this unconsciously. So as a speaker of English and Indonesian, when we see sentences of English or Indonesians, we parse sentences unconsciously or subconsciously, yeah, and then we come up with grammatical sentences. Yeah. Okay, let us continue now. We will move again to the constraints to parsing. Yeah. So what I just give you, so the example that I discussed earlier, yeah. So earlier I give you this example of how a simple sentence is parsed as a process in our brain. Okay, but then what about very complex sentences, as like what we see here? In everyday life, we deal with difficult, complex sentences because human language is infinite. Because a human being can make infinite combination, it is normal for us to make complex and difficult sentences, such as sentences with multiple embedded elements. Yeah. Okay. So these sentences will pose difficulty for the human brain, to parse. So the longer and the more complex a sentence is, the more difficult for our brain to parse or to understand the sentence. Yeah. And again, this difficulty lies not in insufficient memory, but in the type of memory needed for effective analysis. In that, most people use short-term memory. So when we parse, we usually use short-term memory. That's why it's harder for us to parse sentences which are complex and have embedded elements. Okay. Okay, so one of the problems that we have to face with complex sentences, yeah, for example, is ambiguous sentences. So we often find sentences which are grammatically correct, syntactically correct, but they are ambiguous, such as this one. Yeah, Sherlock saw the man using binoculars, and then the other one is Sherlock saw the man the same, yeah, using binoculars. However, these two sentences have different have so this sentence, yeah, the same sentence has two meanings as the pictures here describe. The first one, Sherlock saw the man using binoculars. You will see that it was Sherlock. It was Sherlock who used binoculars. So in the first picture, it was Sherlock who used binoculars to see a man in front of him. But then in the second picture, you will see that it was the man, not Sherlock, who used binoculars to see Sherlock. So the sentence, Sherlock saw the man using binoculars, it can have two meanings. First, Sherlock uses binoculars to see a man, and the second, the man uses binoculars to see Sherlock. Yeah. Okay, and this ambiguous sentence also creates problem for our brain, because then we have the brain must choose a meaning and pursue it until the meaning doesn't fit, then starts over until meaning is constructed. Yeah. So when our brain, yeah, fail to understand the meaning, it will start over back to the start, yeah, and then construct another meaning. It's called backtrack. Yeah. So the brain will backtrack when it fails to understand the meaning of a sentence. And then the brain will construct any meaning, yeah, which is the correct meaning. Yeah. So this is how our brain tries to make sense of ambiguous sentences. Okay, let us see now garden part sentences. So I think all of you are familiar with what garden part sentences are. Yeah. Okay. So you might have discussed this during classes of grammar. Yeah. Okay. So these are sentences that require readers reanalysis. If we see garden part sentences, our brain will normally try to reanalyze this. This is, I give you here two examples of the garden part sentences. Yeah, the first one, the horse that was walked past the fence proceeded steadily, but the horse raced past the barn fell. Yeah, so you see that it's hard, yeah, to understand the sentences, yeah, because you have two different ideas in the same sentence, yeah, and the different ideas, and also you will see that it's harder to understand this, yeah. So first you have this clause, yeah, the horse that was walked past the fence proceeded steadily. So your brain, our brain, when reading this clause, yeah, we have an understanding that the horse can walk steadily, yeah, the horse can walk upright. The horse walked upright past the fence, but then we must backtrack, because the second sentence indicate that the horse fell. Yeah, so you have to ideas swirling in your brain. The horse could walk steadily, it could walk upright, it's fine. But then the second clause, the horse fell, yeah. So your brain backtrack, what? Yeah, I thought that the horse could walk fine, could walk just fine. It could proceed steadily, but now it fell. Yeah, so you have to reanalyze if you come across a garden path sentence. Yeah, and your brain will do the reanalyze for you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let us see now. The second one. The man who fishes goes into work 7 days a week, but the man who hunts ducks out on weekends. This is also a garden path sentence here because you have to reanalyze. Yeah, without reanalyzing, you cannot understand the meaning of the sentence. So you have to backtrack and then you have to reanalyze the sentence. Yeah. So how does our brain reanalyze these garden path sentences? So our brain then applies what we call with a depth first strategy. So we pick analysis that seems to be working and pursuing it as long as possible. If they come across words that cannot be fitted into the tree, they backtrack and start over with a different tree. So then our brain will pick a pattern, a tree that seems to be working, and we pursue it until the tree fails. Yeah. So we try, for example, to understand, oh, the horse can walk upright. Yeah. And then when you see that the horse fell, then you try to backtrack. You try to start over with a different tree in your mind. Yeah. Okay, so this is the strategy to understand or to make sense of the garden path sentences, yeah, in our brain. Okay, so so far, does anyone have any question? Yeah, question so far?
I have a question, ma'am.
Okay, who is speaking?
Monica. Monica is speaking.
Okay, Monica, yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask about the whole concept of the Pinker's concept. I want to know. Let's say the theory is true for everyone, that we all have the tool to process language in our brain, but how can you no I mean but how is it true, especially for those who are incapable of uh let's say children with spectrum? They have difficulties in understanding sentences, they have difficulties in acquiring language as well as making sentences and etc. And how do you see this phenomena?
Yes, thank you so much. This is a very interesting question. I will discuss later, but then let us see the example of this. Yeah. So we, um, there are those who are born with language impairment, and this is also discussed in linguistics, mostly in psycholinguistics. So, for example, I will give you one of the examples of this. Yeah. Actually, I will discuss this later, but then this is a very good time to discuss this. So earlier you mentioned, Monica mentioned that certain individuals are born, for example, with autism or with other disorders that may impair the language abilities. So this is true, yeah. And then based on Chomsky's and Pinker's theories, um, those human beings who are born with certain impairments that may affect their language abilities, they still have these tools in their brain to understand and to use language. But these tools are impaired because of defects in their brain or in their genetics. So this is one of the example, yeah, is the alexia, yeah. So alexia is an impairment in the angular gyrus. This is a part of our brain. So before I will backtrack, yeah. Okay. This is the angular gyrus, yeah. This is the part of our brain that converts visual stimuli into linguistic stimuli and vice versa, yeah. And this part of the brain can be impaired in certain individuals who are born with this impairment. So I will again go back, yeah, to the yeah. So when someone is born with impairment in their angular gyrus, the person will suffer from alexia. Yeah. Okay, because of the impairment. Yeah. Then the person. Yeah. The person. Sorry. The person. Yeah. Will have inability to read and to comprehend written words. So I put here acquired because a person can have a brain damage due to accidents or illnesses. But then alexia can also be can also present in someone who has this, yeah, before they are born because of the impairment of the angular gyrus. Yeah. A person who has alexia has inability to read and to comprehend written words. So they cannot read, yeah, because the angular gyrus can no longer accurately interpret images as linguistic input. Okay, so again, every human being is supposedly born with tools in their brain to use and to operate and to understand languages. But then certain impairments happen to certain individuals due from genetic defect or brain damage because of accidents or illnesses. So that's my answer to your questions. Yeah, in that the ability of certain person to understand and to use language can be impaired due to genetically condition, yeah, or illnesses or brain damage. Yeah, okay. Does that answer your question, Monica? Yeah.
Oh yes, that does answer my question, but would it be okay if I ask one more question related to that one?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Uh, let's say we're not talking about the kids or the children in the spectrum. Let's say we're talking about the general people. I think we all familiar with social media, and we can see there how there are so many people who are actually struggling into putting into making sentences that we all can understand. So I doubt that they're on the spectrum, but these kind of people who are struggling to put sentences coherently is, I think, can be related to this one. And how do you see them?
Yeah. So I think we can refer back to the theory of Saussure. Yeah. So we I think you all are familiar with the father of linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure, who come up with the theory, yeah, of um, I'm sorry that I know this the terms in French. Yeah, so we all have competence and performance. Yeah, as in French is competence and performance. Yeah, so we all have in our brain we have competence and performance. So although certain human beings who have no linguistic impairment, so you post examples earlier about human beings who appear not to have language impairments, but they cannot compose sentences. They cannot, for example, write an essay, for example. This person, you ask them to write sentences of an or essay, but they cannot compose sentences as good as you are, who are students in OM. Okay, so what happened to these people? So their competence in their brain is intact. Yeah. So their competence, their brain is not less than us. They have the tools to understand and to use languages as us, and we call it competence. In that, every human being has a competence to use language. Yeah, but then because they have no training on writing using languages, for example, they do not have the privilege to go to the universities, yeah, or to study in a higher education. So their performance is limited. They can only, for example, compose simple sentences in their daily life, respond to, for example, the basic needs of daily life. Yeah, it's because they have less exposure, they have less training in using language, but this does not affect the competence of language that they have in their brain. Yeah. Okay. So again, this is in line with what Ferdinand de Saussure proposed a century ago, that each human being have first competence to use language in their brain, and the second performance to realize the languages as an utterance or in writing form. Yeah. While competence is limitless for those who have no impairment in their brain. Yeah. But then their performance is limited by what? By experience, training, exposure in using languages. Okay. Does that answer your question, Monica?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you so much for the questions. Yeah. It makes me happy, to see that you are interested in the discussion, and also that you try to look deeper and find out what questions, yeah, that lie ahead. Yeah. So please, yeah, if I cannot answer the question, I will suggest a reading later. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much. Yeah, it's been so engaging. Yeah, I'm really happy, yeah, to attend this lecture. Yeah. Okay. Let us continue now, or go back. Yeah, backtrack. Yeah. With Okay, so we discussed about the garden part sentences, yeah. Okay, so again, I show you that understanding a sentence results from parsing. So we can understand a sentence after a parsing process in our brain, yeah, and then we can make inferences based on the context, yeah. Okay, so fragments of sentences must be integrated into the mental database, not as a list, but as a part of a complex framework. Yeah. Okay, so this is this picture describes a parsing process. Yeah. So first you have initial stage, and then production, and then matching. Yeah, if it cannot match, then you complete parse or you backtrack. Yeah, so this is how we parse difficult or complex sentences in our brain. Okay, okay. Could you excuse me a second? I will just turn off the fan. Yeah, it's getting a bit warm. Yeah, in my house. Yeah. Okay, so I'm back now and we'll discuss about the language and brain. Yeah. So I put the discussion about language and brain to give you a more holistic idea about how our brain helps us to use and to understand language. Yeah. Okay, so understanding of language is mediated less by a person's general knowledge than by the innate mechanism for language use within the human brain. So in line with Chomsky and Pinker's theories, um, it is much more important, yeah. So the mechanism of language is much more important and much more connected with the human brain. So it's the human brain that is much more important for us, yeah, to understand and to use language than our knowledge. Yeah. So this is the example, yeah, of the brain, of parts of the brain that are, sorry, that are responsible for the use of language. Let us see now. First, we have here the parts that are responsible for syntax, yeah, for phonology, for sentence comprehension, and for lexicosemantics. Each of them are interconnected. Okay, so these are the parts of brain that are responsible for our language use and understanding. Okay. Okay, and next we will see lateralization. Yeah. So I think you must know by now that our brain is lateralized or divided into the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. So each of the brain's hemispheres is responsible for different cognitive functions. So your left brain is responsible for logical thinking, verbal part and detail thinking, digital, symbolic, order, math, language, yeah, rational, objective, linear, for example, analytical thinking. Yeah, that's what your left brain is doing for you. And then the right part is for arts, random and free for pictures, music, emotions, imaginations, colors, creativeness. Yeah, okay. We call this as lateralization. Okay, so we call the division of the functions in our human brain as lateralization. Yeah. Okay, because it's lateralized in two hemisphere, the left, yeah, and the right. Yeah. Okay. So when you use language, you mostly use your left parts of the brain. When you play music, mostly you use the right part of your brain. Okay, you can find more information in this book. Yeah. Okay, next, yeah, again, this is parts of the brain. The left one is responsible for logical thinking, such as for using and understanding language. And the right one is for creativity, for arts, for feeling, imagination. Okay, now I will discuss a bit about the physiology of our brain. Yeah. Okay. So the brain is covered by a 1/4 instinct thick membrane. So our brain is covered by a membrane, yeah, called cortex. Yeah, cortex. Okay. This membrane makes human beings capable of higher cognitive function. So because we have this cerebral cortex, yeah, it makes us capable of higher cognitive functions such as doing math, use language. Yeah. Okay, and this is what separates us from animals. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so again, yeah, most of the language centers of the brain are contained in the cortex, yeah, and the cortex is then divided into several parts, yeah. Okay. So again, this is the cerebral cortex that differentiate us from animals, and because of this brain parts, then we can make infinite combinations, while animals can only make limited combinations of sentences. And now we will discuss the STG, yeah, superior temporal gyrus, yeah. And this is responsible for processing sounds, yeah. So this is responsible to process sounds in both left and right hemisphere. So a human being born without impairment in this part will be able to process sounds in both the left and right hemisphere. So we have this STG both in the left and the other side, the right hemisphere. And if we have this without impairment, then we can process sounds because it's directly connected to our ears. So this is directly connected to our ears. Okay. Okay, and next, the other parts that are responsible for our language use is the middle and inferior temporal gyrus, or MTG, ITG. Yeah, this is the MTG, ITG. Yeah, this one, the one that is greenish here. This is responsible for processing word meaning and conceptual representations. So if you have this, then you can process meanings, yeah, and you can also process conceptual representation. So mostly it is responsible in processing meanings and concepts in semantics. Okay, and this is the next we will have the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area or the SPT-STG. Yeah. So Wernicke's area is also called the SPT-STG. This is involved in converting auditory and phonological representations into articulatory motor representations. So it connects this, it connects with your ability to understand phonology of your language and how you convert that into speech. Yeah. So this is the Wernicke's area or the SPT STG. Yeah. Okay, this is the parts. Yeah. Okay, and next we still have the physiology of our brain. It is called the IFG, also known as Broca's area. The Broca's area organizes the articulatory patterns of language and directing the motor cortex, which controls movement of the face, the jaw, and tongue in the case of spoken language, and the hands, arms, face, and body in the case of sign language. So this broadcast area is responsible for the movements of our speech organs. So when you speak, your jaw and your tongue are moved based on what sounds that you are going to make. For example, if you want to make the sound t or d, yeah, your tongue will move to the back of your teeth, to your alveolar ridge. So then you can produce the and the. And this movement is controlled by the Broca's area or the IFG, the Broca's area. Okay, and then in deaf persons, the Broca's area also controls the movements of arms, face, and body for the users of the sign language. Yeah. So this is responsible, yeah, for interpreting the systems of language into utterances or into movements in sign language. Okay. The Broca's area also seems to control the use of inflectional morphemes like plural plural and past tense markers, function words, determiners, and prepositions. So this area is also responsible for morphology. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is the broadcast area, or the IFG, inferior frontal gyrus, yeah, which is responsible, yeah, for controls movement when we produce a speech or a sign, yeah, in sign language. Okay. Okay, so you will find you can find more of the information about broadcast area in the following books. Yeah. Okay, and this we have discussed the angular gyrus. This is an area located between the Wernicke's area, or the SPT, and the visual cortex, and it converts visual stimuli yeah, into linguistic stimuli and vice versa. The angular gyrus allows us to match the spoken form of a word with the object it describes, as well as with the written form of the word. So this part of the brain matches the utterance, the spoken form of a word, with the written form. So for example, when we say cat, then we can match the sound with the object cat that it describes. Yeah. This ability is crucial to the human capacity to read and write. Yeah. Okay. This is also responsible in processing sign languages. Yeah. So this is also connected to the sign languages. Again, this is the angular gyrus. Yeah, you have it all in your brain because you are able to read and write, to connect utterance with written forms. Yeah. Okay. So what happens if someone has impairments? What happens if someone is impaired in their brain? Yeah. So when brain experiences damages, for example, when someone fell or when someone had a stroke, yeah. So you might have a family member who had stroke, or friend who had stroke, or neighbors who had stroke. They often find it difficult to speak fluently. So if you observe somebody who had stroke in the past, they often they often have difficulties. They often have difficulties in using languages, in that they cannot speak fluently. For example, yeah, it's because an illness, a trauma because of falling, for example, or a stroke, yeah, can impair the parts of the brain that enable us to use language properly. Yeah. We call this aphasia. So aphasia are acquired language disorders because of, as I pointed out, illnesses or trauma to the brain. Yeah. Okay. Now we will discuss somebody who has a damaged broadcast area, or the RFG. So individuals with broadcast aphasia, a result of damage to the inferior frontal gyrus, or IFG, also known as broadcast area, suffer from inability to plan the motor sequences used in speech or sign. Yeah. Okay. When they attempt to produce language, they speak or sign haltingly and have a difficult time forming complete words. So when they try to speak, then they cannot produce a complete utterance. Okay. So they lost fluency of the use of language because they have a damage in their broadcast area or their IFG. Okay. They also tend to use telegraphic speech, like short speeches. And then they also lack lack morphological inflection and function words like to and the. Yeah, so this is, I will give you example, yeah, of the speech. Okay, so this one, yeah. So this utterance is produced by an examiner and a broadcast aphasic patient. Let us see now the example. Examiner, tell me, what did you do before you retired? And then the aphasic man who is impaired in the broadcast area responded, bartender, no. So you see that the aphasic man cannot produce utterance fluently. Okay, and instead he uses a short word or incomplete word. Yeah, no, no, yeah. And then examiner, carpenter, and then a basic man, yeah, nodding, yeah, carpenter, 20 year, yeah. So this is the example of somebody with broadcast aphasia, because the person loses the ability to control the motoric movement in his speech organs. So it is harder for him now to produce complete sentences. Yeah. Okay. Okay, next, somebody with Wernicke's aphasia, individuals with damage to the Sylvian parietotemporal area or SPT, and the posterior superior temporal gyrus or STG, or known as Wernicke's area, exhibit Wernicke's aphasia. So when somebody has a damage on their SPT, STG, or Wernicke's area, the person will suffer from Wernicke's aphasia. Okay, so it is very difficult for this patient to understand the speech of others. So a patient with Wernicke's aphasia has difficulties in understanding the speech of others. Yeah, so it's hard for them to understand. Yeah, okay, and for that, Wernicke's aphasic mostly misinterpret. They can misinterpret, yeah, what others say, and then they respond in unexpected way by producing semantically incoherent speech because they cannot understand speech. Then in the end they misunderstand, and then they respond using semantically incoherent speech. So a person with Wernicke's aphasia can be very fluent, but then they mostly produce semantically incoherent speech. That's why their speech is not understandable by a normal person. Yeah. Yeah. Look at this. Yeah. This is the Wernicke's aphasia. Yeah. You can see here. Do you like it here in Kansas City? Yes, I am. Yeah. This is the aphasic, and then the examiner. I'd like to have you tell me something about your problem. Okay, yes, I can heal all of my way. Yeah, and then this is the answer of the aphasic person. Yes, I can heal all of my way. I can talk all of the things I do, and part I can go all right, but I can tell from the other people. I usually most of my things. I know what can I talk and know what they are, but I can always come back, even though I know they should be in, and I know something really, I should know what I'm doing. So basically, they are fluent, but then they mostly produce semantically incoherent utterance, and that's why it's hard to understand what they are trying to convey to you. Yeah. So again, this is what happens if somebody has a if somebody is damaged, yeah, in their Wernicke's area of the brain. Yeah. So I guess this shows how our brain is very important for us to understand and to use the human's language. As you see from the evidence here, if those parts of the brain are impaired or are damaged, then we will suffer also from aphasia or from language disorders. Yeah. Okay, so this is what I explained to you just now. Yeah, the damage of the angular gyrus. Yeah, this will give a person alexia. Yeah, in which the person is difficult to read or to comprehend written words. So somebody who has alexia cannot read and cannot understand written words. Yeah. So yeah, so then this person can no longer accurately interpret images as linguistic input, and this might be, this is very damaging for somebody, yeah, because then the person cannot perform activities, yeah, because they can no longer read or write. Yeah. Okay, and then next we have agraphia. Yeah, this is problems. Another problem, yeah. Okay, and this one is the inability of the angular gyrus to relate the phonetic form of a stimulus with a written form in the visual cortex or with the motor controls necessary to write out the word. Yeah. Okay, so then this person cannot write down words that have been spoken. Yeah. So for example, somebody speaks, then you can, for example, you listen to a lecture and then you make notes. Yeah. When someone has agraphia, the person cannot relate the phonetic form, the utterances with writing forms. Yeah. So this will impair the person's greatly. Okay, so this is agraphia. I will thank you. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Yeah. So far, yeah. So far we have discussed uniqueness of human language, and also language and the brain, parsing and sentences of human language. I discuss a little bit detail about the language and the brain because this is very useful to understand on how our brain contributes greatly to how we acquire and then how we learn, use, and understand language. And then when the parts of the brain responsible for language are impaired or damaged, then we will suffer from language disorders. And this is an evidence of how brain supports us in using language, yeah, and how the theory of the innateness of language, of human language knowledge, and the language instincts, yeah, are somehow logical. Yeah, if we see the relationship between language and the brain. Yeah, I also show you how our brain parse sentences in relation with Pinker's theory, yeah, that he described in the chapter 7 of his book. Yeah, the language instinct. Yeah, and the chapter is the talking head. Yeah, okay. Any questions so far? Yeah, so we still have like 8 minutes. Yeah, I'm going to present maybe another example. Yeah, this one. Yeah. Okay. So I will show you another example of yeah. So this is another problem with linguistic disorders. So you might have heard of this, the Williams syndrome. Yeah. So this is a disorder of developmental. So a person who has this disorder since he or she is born with this, yeah, can have developmental disorder. Okay, so this disorder is caused by the deletion of about 20 genes on chromosome 7, and it affects about 1 in 7,500 children in the world. Yeah, this is very rare. Yeah, in that the language processing is relatively spared, but then the general cognitive development is delayed. So a person who has this syndrome has no problems of processing language, but then they clearly show the cognitive impairment. Yeah. Okay. So individuals with Williams syndrome generally exhibit very outgoing social behavior paired with substantial impairment of visual, spatial, and mathematical skills. Yeah. So um, again, this syndrome affects mathematical skills, yeah, and visual spatial skills, but it doesn't affect their language skills because the parts of the brain that are responsible for language are intact. So, um, so a person who has this syndrome usually uh, logical reasoning and knowledge of social norms are impaired, but they show fair to rich vocabulary and oral communication skills. So they can speak without impairment in the language because there is no impairment on their parts of the brain that are responsible for language use. But then the other parts of the brain are affected, the one that are responsible for mathematical skills, for reasoning, social norms, and social norms. Yeah. So this will give you an idea that the ability to use language is unique, yeah, and that we have it all in our brain, and that it helps us to use and to understand the human language. Okay, I guess we have, oh, I think we already like past 6 minutes. I'm sorry, Purensi. Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
okay.
thank you, Purensi, and thank you all. I will give the floor back to Purensi. Thank you, Purensi.
Thank you so much, Bu Ika. That's a very wonderful lecture. I was attentive the whole time. It was really, really engaging. And thank you to all the students because you were answering the questions and you were also asking questions. Yeah, great questions. So thank you for that. If you still have some questions, you can pass them to me and then I will give them to Bu Ika. Next week, we still have a session with Bu Ika, right, Bu Ika? Do you want to give some sort of, I don't know, assignment or something to do for the students to prepare for the next lecture, or maybe they can just re-listen to the lecture today? What do you think?
Thank you. I guess I can share. Okay, I guess that maybe for next meeting you can come up with your own experience, yeah, in understanding and also in parsing grammar or sentences. You can also maybe share your experiences about those around you. For example, experience of how people parse language and on how on those who are, for example, impaired in the use of their language. Yeah. So I guess not a formal assignment, but maybe I will ask maybe some students to reflect, yeah, on their language use or other people around them in the next week class. Thank you, Purensi.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Ika. So for all the students, you will be able to re-watch the lecture because I will put the YouTube link in Sipijar. And then I think I will get the PowerPoint from Bu Ika so you can read the PowerPoint again. And please reflect on your experience. As Bu Ika said, think about some problems with language that you might have in the past or you might have seen in other people around you. And then you will be able to share them next week. Yeah. All right. So thank you again, Bu Ika. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day, and we will see you again next week. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye. Thank you.
You,
Thank you,
ma'am. Have a
ma'am.
nice day.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Nice day.